Seventh grade. So today we're going to start looking at the pre-writing process for our PBA 1, our digital memoir. And we're going to have a quick little tutorial here on how to use the circle map to plan your PBA, to plan the story that you're going to tell in your memoir. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of label these sections. This could look a little confusing at first, but once we outline it, I think you'll find that it's pretty straightforward. So I need to think about where I'm going to start my story. And I'm going to use this piece of the circle map, and I'm just going to label that as my beginning. Then I'm going to think about, okay, how many pieces of the circle map do I want to use to tell the story of my middle? So I've got my beginning with my intro, characters, setting. And now I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to actually, the middle of my story is going to be the longest, most exciting, and most interesting. So it's going to actually take up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces of this pie. And then over here on the left, in this little piece, this is where I'm going to start planning the end of my story. And then finally, when I get back up here to the top, I'm going to remember that in this piece of the pie, I need to plan out how I'm going to explain the lesson or character trait that I learned from the older person who I'm going to write about. I'm going to capitalize my I there. So this is how you're going to kind of plan and plot your story. Go ahead and pause the video and add those labels to your circle map, whether you're typing on a Cami doc or you have a paper copy. Add those beginning, middle, end, and character trait / lesson labels to your circle map. Okay, we're back. Now it's time to start planning what types of events and sentences, what am I going to actually write in my rough draft? Now, this isn't my whole rough draft. This is just my pre-writing and my brainstorming. So I'm only going to include major details that I want to include, and I don't need to do my whole entire rough draft on this circle map. So in the beginning, if we remember the plot of a story, to tell a good story, we have to include our setting. So for me, the setting of my story is my grandma's house on Thanksgiving. And if you're in my class, you heard this story already. If you're not, you'll hear it right now. So the setting was my grandma's house on Thanksgiving. It was Thanksgiving Day, and there were about 30 to 35 extended family members at her house that day, including my 5 crazy uncles. My uncles always had tricks up their sleeve, and they decided that on this day they were going to play a joke on Grandma. So in the beginning of my story, I've got my setting, my characters, and I've kind of hinted to my reader that there's going to be some action here coming. There's going to be a joke that's going to be played on my grandma that will snag my reader's attention and make them want to read on. So here's the story. This is where I can start. This is where my story actually starts. Notice my story didn't start that morning when I woke up. It didn't start the previous Friday when I got off of school. It started at my grandma's house on Thanksgiving Day, just before the most exciting part of my story. So start your story just before the action. We don't want to bore our readers with details that don't matter. So in the middle of my story, I'm going to start with the events, kind of how in the order that they occurred. So my uncles were in the backyard and they were playing football. And other family members were beginning to arrive. And it was a beautiful day, and I can remember to include some of those sensory details. We've done a lot with tone and mood in Unit 1, so I can remember to include sensory details and a tone or mood that was exciting and happy. It was just going to be a great family holiday. So in this box, I'm going to say what happened next. So my grandma was in the kitchen and she was cooking a big, beautiful Thanksgiving meal that, of course, included a very enormous turkey. So grandma was in the kitchen cooking the meal, including her, I'm going to call it her prize-winning turkey. My grandma's Thanksgiving dinner was amazing. She was a wonderful cook. My uncles were in the backyard, and one of them decided it would be fun to use the grill to play a joke on grandma. So my uncles were in the backyard, and they decided to go to the grocery store and buy a tiny little shriveled up chicken. So one of them ran to the grocery store and bought this teeny tiny little chicken, and the other ones fired up the barbecue. Notice I'm moving through my story now. I'm on this little bottom section. They fired up the barbecue and put the chicken on it, where they proceeded to burn it to a crisp. And then here's where the trick happens. One of my uncles distracted my grandma and got her out of the kitchen. And when her back was turned, they took the giant, beautiful turkey out of the oven and they replaced it with the little burnt up chicken. And then grandma came back. She came back to the kitchen and it was time to get the turkey out. So she took out the quote unquote turkey, which wasn't really a turkey at all, and she burst into tears. My uncles were watching from the backyard. They were peeking in the window watching her. Except for one of them. So my Uncle Neil, and he's my person that I learned a lesson from. He's the person that's older than me that I learned a lesson from. And he's younger from my other uncles by like about 15 years. So it took a lot for him to stand up to his big brothers. So my Uncle Neil decided that enough was enough and he couldn't stand there and watch grandma sobbing anymore. So he went into the kitchen, he went inside, and I guess you could say he snitched on his brothers and told grandma it was a joke. My sister and I were standing there in the kitchen when he did that. So then I can move up here to this piece of the pie. And here I'm going to explain the lesson that I learned from my Uncle Neil that day. So I learned empathy and kindness. And I learned that joking can go too far and it can hurt someone's feelings. We have to put ourselves in their shoes and we have to realize when their feelings have been hurt and when we've taken the joke too far. So I'm going to expand. In my rough draft, I'll expand on that a little bit more, but that's the main idea of my message. So go ahead and pause the story and take a few minutes and plan your beginning, middle, end, and your lesson. Okay, so now we've got our beginning, middle, and end, we've got some main ideas or some important events that we're going to remember to include in our beginning, middle, and end. And now I just want to add some notes to myself on things like tone and mood, details, strong adjectives, stuff like that. So, the beginning of my story, I'm going to think about what tone or mood do I want to create for my reader. And we've been talking a lot about this in Unit 1. So in the beginning of my story, the tone and mood that I want to create is one of excitement, anticipation, and fun. So everybody's getting super excited. It's a happy time. Everybody's about to see the family. In the middle of my story, the tone or mood that I want to create is, well, I guess we have that right here, exciting and happy still. But then it kind of shifts. So I'm going to move this text box down here. My tone or mood shifts to one of kind of worry or concern. When my uncles were plotting their trick, it kind of became worrisome and concerning to me because I knew this was a really important day to my grandma. Every year, she just looked forward to Thanksgiving. And so I became a little worried and concerned. So I'm going to make sure and add some details in my story, in my rough draft, that will convey that worry or concern. And then over here, I want to create, when my grandma took out the turkey and burst into tears, I really want to convey her sadness, shock, and surprise. And then up here toward the end, I really want to convey the feeling of relief. And I'm going to say a feeling of comfort, knowing that everything was going to be okay because my Uncle Neil told my grandma the truth. And then finally up here, I want to create a tone or mood of everything turns out okay in the end, if we can show that kindness and empathy. So I'm going to kind of continue that relief and comfort and kind of sum it all up for my reader. So go ahead and pause the video one more time and jot down some tone and mood words that you want, the tone or mood that you want to convey in your memoir to your reader. Okay, now we've got our whole memoir planned and we're ready to start typing our rough draft. As you type your rough draft, refer to your circle map and remember to include all of the details and bullet points that you put on your circle map. Happy drafting!